we have the vaccine for COVID and mass vaccination program will start from tomorrow in India. This is great news and relief to all of us. In order to know more insights about the vaccine, we have arranged this session from Dr. Manohar from Manipal Hospital to help us to understand the importance and various protocols about this vaccine. During the session, you can post your query in the chat box. At the end of the session, Dr. Manohar will try to answer as many as possible. With this note, I would request Manohar to take over. And there is a question also which has been posted on your chat box. Maybe employees can vote for it accordingly. Over to you, Manohar.
Well, thank you so much. Thank you, Mr. Sridhar. I hope I am audible and my slides are visible.
Yes, sir.
Yeah, firstly, Happy New Year to everyone. 2020 was tough. It can't get worse than that is what we usually feel. And then 2021, we are looking forward. And as you really addressed, tomorrow is a big day that we are rolling out vaccines. And many of us frontline workers are going to get it tomorrow or day after tomorrow, so on. So we're doing a great job on that. So before moving on to this topic, there is a raging debate worldwide, including in the medical fraternity, about the question which I just framed it. So I hope you people can answer it. Whether you would like to take the COVID vaccine, yes, no, or not sure. And maybe you can re-answer it after the session. I'm just trying to give a basic understanding of this vaccines and the COVID vaccine. If someone is interested in knowing who I am, this is what I am. I've been working in Manipal for almost 18 plus years now. And then, yeah, Manipal is a bigger place, and I'm glad that we are also exam center for the prestigious MRCP UK exam. So that's about myself in a nutshell. And then, what did this pandemic mean to me? If can keep themselves muted. What does this pandemic mean to me? When I pose this question, the first two things which comes to my mind is the Darwin's theory, survival of the fittest. That's how the virus, commonly we knew about this flu virus which used to mutate. Now it is said that the adenovirus is mutated and come into a new form as COVID-19. And most importantly, the second line there, what strikes me most is that in the long history of humankind, those who learn to collaborate and improvise most effectively have prevailed. So if you don't adapt, you perish. You may be a big dinosaur, but you won't last as much as a little cockroach. Other thing, what I think some of you should mute yourself. Rest of all, mute your.
I would request the employees to go on mute, please.
And most importantly, I always believe this as a part of human brain. And many times we were dilly-dallying between economy versus health and life versus livelihood. These are all some things to ponder about it, nothing specifically related to the vaccine. We also realized that an ounce of prevention is better than tons of treatment. And we always should end that with, let's leave a better planet for the future generation. So with these thoughts, I'll proceed further. What is vaccine? I'm sure most of us know it. Edward Jenner is called the father of vaccination, and he coined this terminology when first vaccination or vaccine was invented for variola or smallpox or cowpox, actually. It's a biological preparation that provides active acquired immunity to a particular infectious disease. So how do you get immunity towards any disease? Firstly, by suffering from the disease and fighting it out, you get an immunity. Secondly is by use of vaccination. So the second method is called vaccination, where the biological preparation provides active immunity. It typically contains a weakened or killed form of microbe. Sometimes it's toxins, or not necessarily whole microbe, it could be some surface protein. The next point is very interesting. Most of us think vaccines are prophylactic and used for preventing infections. But there are certain therapeutic vaccines also, like for example, BCG, the small, all of us would have taken the BCG scar would have been there on our left shoulder. That BCG vaccine can be used for treatment of bladder cancers. And there's a lot of trials going for therapeutic vaccine against HIV. Undoubtedly, vaccine is the most effective method of preventing infectious disease, and about 25 diseases have vaccinations available now. So this is a very interesting and illustrative slide about vaccines through the history. Well, it all started, see, if you can look at the timelines, it's very clearly seen that the time gaps are too much. Yeah, so first, any document about vaccination or people working towards vaccination was there in 1721 when Lady Mary Montagu returned to England from Turkey to get her child vaccinated. The first vaccination was given in 1796, quite a lot of time lag, by Edward Jenner when he inoculated a boy with cowpox and later challenged with the disease and showed that he showed immunity and the boy remained healthy. So that's a very big landmark, and that's why he's called as the father of vaccination. More importantly, 1921, the BCG vaccine is in vogue. We all are receiving it. And then the last vaccine before the COVID vaccine came in, which was approved, was the Ebola vaccine in 2019. So this is in a nutshell about vaccination. Vaccination, as we all know, prevent infectious disease. And many of you have heard of herd immunity or indirect or population-based immunity. By the virtue of having the disease or by the virtue of having vaccination, if many people are immune to it, it also further protects others who are not exposed to the disease to contract the disease in a much less often way. So that is called as herd immunity. We vaccinate few groups of people and that may protect the whole population. So this is the meaning of herd immunity. To know more about it, wait till the thank you slide. There is a beautiful illustration. So till then you can ponder over it, and if there is any questions, I'll be glad to answer. Does vaccines work? If you look at history, there are people who are opposing vaccines for time and again. And I showed you in that illustration that how much time lag was happening between approval of vaccines and so on. So if you look at this slide, without naming, this is a very simplified slide without looking at the numbers and the dates very seriously. Look at the disease of whooping cough, that is diphtheria, measles, chickenpox, mumps. We all have vaccines for it. And then, sometime back, before the availability of vaccines, thousands of cases were there. And currently, the cases are less than 5% of them. Take polio and diphtheria, they are almost been eliminated. So this says that vaccines definitely work. And to illustrate it further, you look at measles in Europe, as this slide shows. In 1980, there were about 851,000 cases of measles. And when we started vaccinating, the cases dropped till about 2010. And 2016 also, there were only 4,000 cases. At that time, many of the countries stopped immunizing against measles and the cases are on the rise. So this is a clear-cut illustration where you start a vaccination, the cases come down and the disease is not gone, remember. So, but if you stop it, then it can have a rise again. So how do these vaccines work? Well, what do we do when we vaccinate is give a small amount of a harmless form of a disease. Harmless form of the organism causing the disease. Then our defense mechanism looks at this and triggers antibodies towards it to fight them. When later, when we encounter the disease per se, we already have some antibodies. It also triggers what is called as the memory cells, and we put up a better defense against the organism. That's how the vaccines work. So we induce a small harmless disease by using the organisms, its toxins or one of its protein, sensitize our body body will form the defense, antibodies towards it. So when you get real encounter with the disease, you are better prepared to face it. So this is how, in short, it works. So if you look at it as an illustration, existing pathogen and existing antibody, it is just to show that each disease looks different, like measles, chickenpox, and flu look different. And the antibody definitely looks different. It can't be the same antibody. It's not like a nuclear bomb which kills everything. We need to have something very specific towards each organism. So if you have a new pathogen, as my pointer points, there is no antibody towards it. So when we use vaccination, then a new antibody starts forming, and if you titrate and target the vaccine nicely, and you can get a complete protection for the said infection. So vaccine definitely protects an individual, but when we vaccinate in the mass population, even some people who can't be vaccinated, like very, very young, very old, someone doesn't want to vaccinate, someone can't afford to vaccinate for various reasons, even they get protected towards it because the disease chain is cut off by a person who is vaccinated. So this is called as mass or herd immunity. Classic example is pulse polio vaccination drive. I'm sure all of you have heard Amitabh Bachchan advertising for pulse polio, saying even if your child is vaccinated already with pulse polio, please vaccinate again because it will help in herd immunity. It has a slightly different mechanism to it. I will come back to that if someone is interested to know. So how are vaccines developed? Well, let's say this is the disease-causing organism on to the left of your screen. And there is one part of it called as antigen. Antigen is a small protein on the disease-causing organism, which is how it is recognized. For example, Dr. Manohar has a scar on the left cheek. We write it in our passport. So sometimes we recognize me more by the scar on the left cheek rather than everything. So this part of the protein is the one which is important for causing disease in humans. And when the body recognizes it, it fires antibodies towards this protein. So that protein which elicits immune response is called as antigen and then forms the antibody. I hope I'm very clear. It's a tiny part of the organism, mostly a protein, which is important part to cause disease. So you isolate that, use it in many different ways, put it in the vaccine and administer to people, and then it produces antibody. So it doesn't only contain this antigen, but it also has some adjuvants, preservatives, stabilizers, surfactant, residuals, diluents in many cases. So there's much more to the vaccine than just the part of the microorganism component to it. Well, everyone are excited to know about what happens in this coronavirus. For example, the antigen of importance in coronavirus is the spike protein. You might have seen a lot of pictures of coronavirus. It has some spikes on it. This spike protein is very important because it goes and binds to the receptor called ACE2 receptors. From there, it gets internalized into the body and causes havoc. So this is the most important protein. Antibodies produced against this spike protein protects the humans from this disease. So then the first thing is in the research phase, people will see which is the most important protein component to which we want antibodies. And they select that with a lot of research and then they put into the trials. So that is what, first it is in the lab, then there are trials from phase 1, phase 2, phase 3, and later it is approved for broader use. So if you can see this, as the phase of the trial increases, more and more people are recruited into the studies. So I think we should know a brief about how the vaccines are developed. Firstly, it is the preclinical studies, study in animals. Next is the phase 1 clinical trial. You do it in healthy adult volunteers. They do not have the, see, this applies to the other drugs also. For example, an anti-diabetic drug is to be released into the market. First, you study this in healthy adult volunteers. Then only you give it to those people for whom it could be beneficial, like diabetic patients. So phase 2, you move it on to the population to which you are targeting. Phase 3 is important phase, which I am a part of many phase 3 clinical trials at Manipal, where we do, it's a multi-centric study. All over the globe, they select some centers and study this vaccine or a new drug for its efficacy and safety. It doesn't end there. Phase 4 also is equally important. Then you release into the market and keep an eye on the adverse effect possibly which could come. So these are the most important thing. Human challenge studies, we don't do it, we leave it. So it starts at the preclinical stage. For example, in context of the COVID, we started thinking of, okay, spike protein is the most important thing. Then you go into the phase 1 clinical trial for healthy adult volunteers, then to the more structured people, then thousands of people across the globe, and then still post-marketing surveillance happens. Why am I stressing so much is, if you want to do all these things, you will end up 8 to 10 years or more to get a vaccine ready for the disease. Yes, it is 8 to 10 years. It is less than a year, and vaccine is ready for use now. That is why it is called as the pandemic accelerated model. On the bottom of your screen, you can see research is not touched, but the preclinical study, what I was describing, is overlapped with the phase 1, phase 2, and even sometimes the phase 3 trials. Simultaneously, when they are gaining confidence, they are starting the manufacturing process and also administration. So tomorrow is the big day for all of us, where we're starting the mass vaccination whole India, pan-India, in a structured manner. So I hope I'm very clear. So that's why a lot of hue and cry among even the medical professionals. Are we rushing it up? Are we waiting it for too long? So a lot of doubts. I'm sure it will be an exciting question answer session when we come up. So most vaccines are given 1, sometimes even 2 doses. Why 2 doses? This is the answer for it. If you look at after the initial injection in the first vaccine dose, there is a primary immune response. But later with time, the antibody titers come down, and at that time, typically about 4 to 6 weeks later, we give a second dose and we give a better immune response, or the secondary immune response. Not only that, on to the right you can see my pointer, it triggers a better memory B and T cells. So there are some cells in the body, it's not only the brain which has memory, even there are memory B and T cells which stores, okay, this is the organism, I will remember, if it comes, I will speed up the process to fight it. So that's why the 2 doses, again, first dose is full, second dose is half, or vice versa, is again a controversial thing. How do you deliver the vaccine? It could be given IM, intramuscularly, subcutaneously, under the skin, or like polio, it could be sometimes oral vaccines. Sometimes more than 1 dose is required for the first reason I explained, to build immunity. Secondly, booster dose. With time, the vaccines can wane off. So, for example, in high-risk group for hepatitis B, we give a booster dose. Same thing with measles. Some countries give a second booster dose 18 months after the first dose. And also, more importantly, I would like to draw your attention toward the third point, tackling changes of the organism, like the yearly flu vaccine. We all know before the COVID, we were always worried about the seasonal flu. We slowly changed itself to the H1N1. So when this organism, I told you survival of the fittest. So to survive in the environment, organisms keep changing and mutating. So at one point of time, the new organism looks completely different from the pre-existing organism, like how the H1N1 pandemic happened. So when we do vaccinations, we should always keep in mind what strain is available. All of you must have heard of the mutated COVID vaccine, COVID virus also. So we should keep that in the mind also. And we keep doing research, surveillance on what strain is going on, and we add them to the future vaccination when it comes. I hope I am clear. That's why when the flu came, there was only 1 or maybe 2 types of viruses which were included. But the current flu vaccine which we are taking is a quadrivalent vaccine, means 4 types of flu viruses are there in that vaccine. So similarly, going forward, for now we have 1 virus type of COVID. I'm sure as a theory of natural selection, there will be new strains of viruses, and we will implement in our vaccination program later. So what are the types of vaccine? It is a bit more complicated part of the talk, but I'm just to sensitize the audience. I'll not dig deep into it, but I'm just to sensitize the audience about what really vaccine is. It's as simple as we talk. to know this, you should look at this. There is something called as a virus vaccine. You take the whole virus, modify it, completely inactivate it, or even sometimes kill it. When you do it, when you kill the virus, it's called a killed vaccine. If you modify it and make it inactive, it is called just a virus vaccine. And because it is inactivated, it is attenuated. So it is called as a attenuated live vaccine or killed vaccine are the two types of the virus vaccines which we talk of. So this is injected and body recognizes it and elicits the immune response. Other is protein-based vaccines. Protein is most important component. What we're talking about, antigen, antibody are all proteins. So one of the protein component which is important, for example, the spike protein, we know is the most important protein. For pathogenesis, you take that, purify it and inject as a vaccine. So the commonly used protein, as I said, for COVID disease is spike protein. It looks like a virus, but it's not a complete virus. It is the most important, relevant part of the virus. So that is protein-based vaccine. Viral vector vaccine. It's another interesting one. I think few of our vaccines are based on the viral vector, including the Russian Sputnik vaccine and even our Covishield vaccine. The gene for a pathogen means, as I said, the protein is important. This part of the protein is inserted into a different virus, which is not so harmful, like the adenovirus of the chimpanzee. So they take the adenovirus part protein, which is harmful, the spike protein, insert it into the adenoviral component of the chimpanzee virus, and then give it. Here, good thing is that virus would multiply in our body, so the antigen presentation is more, immune response also is better. So that is another way of looking at it, because you can't inject the COVID itself, then it may cause disease. So similar to the COVID, adenovirus of the chimpanzees are utilized, but they carry only the protein, spike protein of COVID, and that elicits a response. Nucleic acid vaccines. This is novel virus and the novel technology. This technology has never been used in the past to develop any vaccines. So the nucleic acid, it caused a lot of furor. It could be, as we all, if you could remember and go back to your biology, nucleic acid is DNA and the RNA, deoxyribonucleic acid and ribonucleic acid. So this is a new technology, the DNA plasmid. DNA, we are very worried because genetic components are involved there. RNA, there were initial concerns, but we know that RNA doesn't get into the DNA, doesn't cause any genetic mutations. This was doing rounds in a lot of social media that it may change your genes and so on and so forth. Less likely, very unlikely in fact. So if you want to put all these things in a nutshell, types of vaccines, what I have explained is on to the left of your screen, and some current examples are on to the right of your screen. So if you just look at it, DNA, RNA is the first time we are using it. There are no examples for it. Viral vector means another agent like the adenovirus of the chimpanzee instead of the COVID virus. This technology was used for Ebola, Zika, and dengue viral vaccines. Protein subunit vaccines means some part of the protein is taken or part of the protein is taken and prepare a vaccine like the herpes, hepatitis B, and HPV, which we give it for the ladies to prevent the CS cervix, carcinoma of the cervix. Inactivated vaccines like the polio, live attenuated vaccines. You take the virus and you beat it up so much that it becomes impotent to cause the disease, and you use that part of it. This is used in the MMR vaccine, chickenpox, polio, and TB. So there are different types of vaccines for your understanding. And again, with respect to COVID, what is happening, if you want to look at it again to the left of the screen, highlighted part only you concentrate, otherwise it looks very, very busy slide. Oxford AstraZeneca vaccine, we know it has completed the phase 3 trial and people are taking it in the UK and the US. Sputnik Camellia vaccine, again it's a viral vector vaccine, completed. It was the first vaccine to be approved. Why so much of hue and cry is even this vaccine was approved before the phase 3 trials were completely out. So people in our medical fraternity started, Russians and Chinese are hurrying it up. I don't know, there could be much more reasons than just science dictating terms. And the other vaccine is the Mrna vaccine, which you must have heard of, and the Pfizer vaccine. These are mRNA-based vaccines. I told you again, mRNA-based vaccines is the new technology It has good results. 90 to 95% plus people are protected is what they claim. But the problem with this stringent storage measures, minus 70° is what you need to store it as. The last one, if you look at it, is the DNA vaccine, intranasal. It's very, very interesting because it is one of the non-injection-based vaccines. It also produces local immunity in the nasal, and it's still in the phase 2 of development. So if you look at the current status of vaccine development, if you look only at the, again, a busy slide, but you just concentrate on number of vaccines in clinical development is 63, and preclinical development is 172. So we have quite a lot of vaccines in the pipeline. And if you want to come specifically to the COVID vaccine, I think I have alluded to it. It's just a summary of what are the types of vaccines which are available. Again, interestingly, active immunity and passive immunity. You must be remembering that some of the COVID cases were treated by convalescent plasma, means some of our colleagues who had the disease donated their plasma. We presume that they had antibodies, and this was injected to the patients, and the pre-formed antibody in your other person could help this patient fight out the disease. So that was called convalescent plasma, passive immunity, and there are antibodies developed for it. Bamlanivimab also was in great news for it, but here it is for passive immunity, means the person doesn't produce the antibody. Somewhere else the antibody is produced and it is transfused to you to fight the disease. So otherwise it is active immunity, and I think I've told it again and again what are the types of vaccines which were used. So coming specifically, what is happening tomorrow or in next few days, Covishield. A lot of us have more acceptance towards Covishield because as you see the highlighted part, it is phase 3 clinical trials are completed and it is peer reviewed, means some of the doctors in the field have looked at the data and found it to be useful. Astra Oxford scientists in the UK had collaborated with Serum Institute of India and our ICMR. So this is approved by DCGI. And the second vaccine which got approval, it is a bit more of a controversy thing, is the Covaxin produced by Bharat Biotech. This is important. The phase 3 trial is ongoing. Shortly they will release the reports is what they are saying. Why the difference between this vaccine is Covaxin is a killed vaccine. They have killed the COVID virus and used it in the lab as I explained to you. And the previous Covishield was the vector vaccine where they use adenovirus, the chimpanzee. So why we are a bit concerned is we thought the phase 3 trials are not yet completely out and it has not yet been peer reviewed. So some of us are very skeptical to take this, but nevertheless, there is a lot of faith in Bharat Biotech. This is the largest manufacturing unit in the world. The amount of vaccines we supply to Bharat Biotech is unmatched by anyone. And interestingly, if someone wants to know, when everyone were fighting to see which vaccine to take, Bharat Biotech were very smart and they were expanding their whatever process they have so that they can do mass manufacturing irrespective of who gets it. So that's an interesting thing to know. The other vaccines, I'll just allude to it. ZyCoV-D is Zydus Cadila is one of the companies, and they are coordinating and making a vaccine based on plasmid DNA vaccine, and still the phase 2 trials is ongoing. And Sputnik, as I mentioned, it is a Russian vaccine, again a vector-based vaccine. And then Dr. Reddy's lab is collaborating with them, and shortly it could be available also. Most interesting is another one, biological novel COVID-19 vaccine. Interestingly, instead of targeting the virus or the protein, they have targeted the receptor binding domain of SARS-CoV-2. So again, it could be a bit more to know. Any virus or microbe will bind to some place called as a receptor. So many of them are targeting the antigen. These people are targeting the receptor binding domain specific for it. Again, trials are still ongoing. So if you want to put it in a nutshell, the Indian landscape of COVID-19 vaccine, this is what it is. I mentioned everything. So someone interested can take a screenshot and look at it later. So Covishield has more promise and it is peer reviewed. Covaxin is following suit. The others, will come sooner or later. So how are they doing this process? It is a huge country. So the advantage is we have experience with mass vaccination unlike any other country, like how we did the mass pulse polio vaccine. And the ballot, what we do, the election ballot, is also a very inspiring thing on which we are basing how to make the vaccines available to everyone. So very, very interesting. It's an expert committee, NECVAC, what we call it as. They have formulated how to go about it. We have decided it will be 2 doses. It will be done on multiple platforms. And importantly, there are multiple vaccines which may get available, but if you've taken the first dose, some vaccine, please stick to the same vaccine for the second dose. And the temperature should be 2 to 8 degrees, not very difficult, not -70 like the American vaccines. And as I said, the rollout will be via the election model. And definitely, this is the point which I added. Our experience in mass vaccination is unmatched, so people need not worry about it. This is what we are trying to do tomorrow. Phase 1, 30 crore population will be targeted. Healthcare workers, 1 crore. Frontline workers, 2 crores, and other high-risk group remaining. And then I'm sure some of you have downloaded this app. This is just an illustration. CoVid digital platform for COVID-19 vaccine delivery. They have really thought out very well. It's always an easier for us to blame the politicians and the government, but what they are doing is phenomenal in this context. So look at this. I'm sure some of you will. So from the vaccine manufacturing site here to reaching us, the beneficiary, there is definite tracking. Just now, I understand as I come to this department that we had a intense meeting amongst all our hospital colleagues who are driving it. And then this is how it will be guiding principle for vaccine eligibility for beneficiaries. We should understand that we need to give priority for some people. And I think the COVID map is not yet fully active. So kindly register it, put up your medical records, which are there to get your priority right. You don't have to rush. Sooner or later, everyone will be getting it. And this is the COVID module. I'm not getting to the details of it. And interestingly and importantly, they have linked our Aadhaar, DigiLocker, and SafeVac system together so that it is not abused. And beneficiary gets vaccinated. There's a periodic SMS notification for the particular dose with the next date and time for the subsequent dose also. And there's a digital certificate. So we are going very well with respect to this. And just as I was trying to complete the slides yesterday, I received this one notification from the government of India dated yesterday, like precautions and contraindications. I'm sure a lot of people will have doubts on this, but we're glad to address that. Age group, see, any drug or any vaccine generally will not be studied for pediatric purpose alone. It will be usually in the adults. So we do not have data whether this vaccination can be done for people, for younger children. Contraindications, yes, someone has allergy, yes. And the second most important thing is pregnant and lactating women. Again, there will never be a trial done anywhere for any drug or vaccine in pregnant cases because of ethical issues. But someone is pregnant or feeding, better not to take the vaccine. Then most importantly, I had COVID, I have recovered, should I take the vaccine? This is a very, very raging question. We are discussing and debating about this even in our hospital and everywhere else. 4 to 8 weeks after recovery, you could still take it. But if you are less than that, if you have COVID less than 2 months, better to avoid it is the thing. So definitely I have to re-emphasize that past COVID infection beyond 2 months is not a contraindication for the vaccine. I will answer it when they ask why. Chronic diseases like cardiac, neurological, pulmonary, kidney, heart issues, or cancers people are having, please go ahead and take it because these diseases make you more vulnerable, and this is not a contraindication for the vaccine. This is an indication for the vaccine. And in fact, even people with HIV can take the vaccine. So what we don't know, I showed you a normal model how the vaccine takes time, about 10, 12 years. The fastest vaccine was 8 years, and now we have rushed it in almost a year. So what we do not know, duration of protection. So some say 1 year, some say 6 years. I don't know, honestly. Effectiveness against transmission means vaccine, what does vaccine do to you? It may make your chance of getting severe illness, hospitalization less, but you still can contract the disease and transmit to someone else. That's why all your measures of masking, distancing, washing will continue. So it is not effective against not transmitting the disease to others. Effective against asymptomatic infection, will it prove? Nobody knows. Certain population, as I mentioned, children, we do not have data. And with past COVID-19 infection, I want to reiterate, even the FDA of the USA says, if you have past COVID and more than 2 to 3 months after that, you can take the vaccine. So before I conclude, some key messages: vaccines have the power to protect against vaccine preventable diseases. I showed you in the illustration how measles was making a comeback and how we have eliminated few diseases. So do not worry. They are definitely safe and effective. We have decades of experience with that. It was useful across all ages, even though COVID-specific vaccine were not studied in very young children and pregnant ladies. Get vaccinated to protect ourselves and also those around us. Concept of herd immunity, what I'm talking to. I won't say don't debate. Even if you debate, vaccination would be prudent. So don't debate, vaccinate. So I was alluding to the herd immunity, which is on the right of my screen. I would like to thank you all for the patient listening. I don't know whether it took longer than needed time, but I think it was a new concept and something new I thought I would discuss in detail, and I'll be glad to answer any questions.
Thank you, Doctor. Doctor, we have some questions posted on the chat box. If you can go one by one, it will be helpful.
Yeah, if you could read it, or is it available for me to read? Where is it? Yeah.
I can read it out.
Okay, I'll look at the chat, or if you want to. You can read it because there is a chance that body doesn't produce antibody. Yeah, one question is, Titash Mitra says, do people who had corona need the vaccine? I think I answered it. If it is beyond 2 to 3 months, you can still get the vaccination done. Question is why? Well, whenever we get some diseases, we get long-term immunity. Some diseases give us lifelong immunity. But with respect to COVID, we have seen some cases of reinfection. Also, a few of our friends who got the disease, who were kind enough to donate their plasma, when they went and checked their antibodies, there were no antibodies there. But there could be another explanation for it. Whenever we look at getting immunity, one is the antibody-mediated immunity, the other is cell-mediated immunity. So if I have mounted a cell-mediated immunity against this virus, antibodies could be less. So in short, the antibodies to COVID won't last for too long. So even if you had COVID, and if you're beyond 3 months of infection, it is prudent to take it. Remember, there is no compulsion. It is just a suggestion. Is there a chance, Giridhar Patel asks, is there a chance that you won't mount an antibody response to the vaccine? It could happen. Always there will be responders and non-responders. But most people would respond. Even in any drug, there could be some responders and non-responders. The other explanation is some of us can have a cell-mediated immunity as opposed to antibody-mediated immunity, as I explained. Does the available vaccine works on mutated virus is what Tejasvi asked. Very important question. I explained to you, I gave an example of H1N1 virus, which is actually a seasonal flu virus. It knows survival of the fittest. So with time, this virus modifies its protein. Small mutations will not cause any problem. These are called as antigenic drifts. If, for example, you can show your friend is never not the same he was. So with the environment, he also reactions could change. But these are called as antigenic drifts. So when antigenic drifts happen, the vaccines will definitely work. But over a period of time, lot of drifts can accumulate or can make a major change called antigenic shift. that new virus, which will look totally different from the other virus, then it's called as a totally mutated virus, and we need to have that antigen to be protective. That's why I explained to you the influenza vaccine, which started with one virus particle, has quadrivalent vaccine now, means 4 different type of strains are inculcated. So government, WHO, everyone will be doing surveillance worldwide. What is the current strain? Let's say after a year, the next COVID vaccine will have 2 strains in it to accommodate the new strain. Otherwise, it will be ineffective. So I think that is the same question asked by Titash Mitra. I have answered it. Yeah. Swarnima says one of the 2 vaccines is only 70% effective. So what could be the consequence of it is for the rest 30%? Nothing is 100% foolproof, isn't it? So similarly, many times the vaccines are 60 to 80% effective only, most vaccines. mRNA was the new technology used by the Americans, the Pfizer and Mrna group, who claim 90 to 95% effectiveness, which honestly is not commonly seen with other vaccines. So don't worry about that. We look at the better half of 70% than worry about the 30% is what I feel. Yeah, there are some medical incidents on COVID vaccination. What are your thoughts on it? Is it safe to take? From Ellen, I don't know what is Ellen. Anyway, well, there is something called as risk-benefit ratio, right? So any drug which hits the market, any vaccine which hits the market, it goes through the stringent phases what I showed. And if the risk-benefit ratio is favorable, then only we start the vaccination. Yes, there are some local reactions which are told, like local pains, sometimes a cold cough, sometimes a fever, body ache can happen. Rarely, some neurological complications like Bell's palsy or the facial palsy, or very rarely something called transverse myelitis, which affects the spinal cord, also has been documented. But many of the stories which came about, very funny stories have come out, is all fake news. Kindly check it before you spread it. Shreyas Rao has a very valid question, which even I am a party to it, in the sense I also would like to have a choice of vaccination. As far as the information given to us, as of now, there is no choice. You have a choice to take it or not. And what comes to you, but I don't think, as I'm talking to a general public, isn't it? So medical profession is trying to get we are given the vaccine first. So even we do not have choice is what I'm told. Let's see tomorrow what I get it. But as the general public, in the times to come by, we could still have multiple vaccines. Maybe we'll get better data, and possibly you could choose what you want. There could be a cost attached to it, but that's okay. Yeah, I think that same follow-up question Prashant Menon has asked, would we know which vaccine is administered? As of now, for my understanding, we are not told which vaccine, but after looking at it, we have a choice to take it or refuse it. Any more questions or comments? I'd be glad to answer.
I would request employees to post their questions on the chat box. So Dr. Manohar will be glad to answer the questions.
I think it is to...
Yes, we will get the recorded session.
Well, thank you, Abhishek, for acknowledging our efforts. We join in to salute you and your colleagues in this hour and share it with all my colleagues around. Yeah, it was tough time. I'm glad that we used to have innumerable number of cases. Now the cases have come down, and I pray sincerely that we do not have a second wave, and kindly take care of yourself also.
Thank you, Dr. Manohar, for a detailed insight. This is definitely useful information to all of us. I would like to thank once again to our colleagues who have joined this call. With this, we are ending today's session. Have a nice rest of the day and a great weekend. Thank you so much.
Yeah, before we close, I think some questions came. Cardiovascular disease and diabetes, yes, you should take it. immune diseases get vaccinated, yes, including people who are HIV. We suggest them to get the vaccination because all these cardiovascular disease, diabetes, renal disease, autoimmune disease are considered high risk group of people. And with our own experience, we have seen people with high risk have not done well. And one more point, why the frontline warriors should get it, because it is astonishing for many of you to know the risk of death or mortality in a medical professional is 10 to 12 times more than that of normal population. So if a medical professional gets COVID, it's much more severe and serious to him. Thank you.
Thank you, Doctor, for taking those questions. Thank you so much. Thank you
Thank
all.
you so much. It was our pleasure. I would like to thank our colleagues from our department to have it arranged, and I hope it was useful for all of you. And thank you all for logging in and showering some praises also. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Doctor.